Hello and welcome back to an episode of A Push with Jocks 2.0. Today we will be covering the following topics, and you can feel free to follow along in your American pageant. Now let's get right into it. In May 1844, the two major political parties at the time nominated their candidates for presidency. The Whig Party nominated Henry Clay as he was the most popular man in the country at the time. The Democrats nominated James K. Polk, and he was America's first dark horse candidate. A dark horse is also known as a surprise candidate. So how exactly was he a surprise candidate? Originally, Van Buren was supposed to be nominated, but his opposition to annexing Texas alienated the Southern voters, so Polk was a safer bet. Even though Polk was a candidate, he had a lot of experience in politics prior to being nominated. He was also sponsored by Andrew Jackson. The Democrats promoted him as another young hickory, while Whigs taunted him with the question, who is James K. Polk? The campaign of 1844 was partly an expression of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was the belief that the expansion of the U.S. throughout the American continent was both justified and inevitable. The many believers of manifest destiny believed that God wanted to expand, would spread democratic ideals. Expansionist Democrats love the concept of manifest destiny. Their entire platform was structured around the reannexation of Texas and the reoccupation of Oregon. They wanted to expand the territory all the way up to the 54-40 line. Their slogan was all of Oregon or none. The Democrats made a big deal out of their slogan, and the Whigs retaliated with the slogan Polk, Slavery in Texas, or Clay, Union and Liberty. Whigs also spread the lie that a group of Tennessee slaves were branded with Polk's initials in an attempt to slander his name. The crucial issue of annexing Texas. He personally favored annexing Texas, and this appealed to the South, but he also wanted the northern voters, so he said that he wanted to postpone the annexation of Texas. He would have lost even more voters if he hadn't supported both sides, but his words still alienated the passionate anti-slaverites. Polk wins the election of 1844 as Clay lost by 5,000 votes in the popular count. Party, which was a small anti-slavery party based in New York, diverted 16,000 votes from Clay. The Liberty Party ruined Clay's chances of being elected, and by doing so, it quickened the annexation of Texas, the very thing that they were against. The Democrats said that since Polk had won, then the voters had basically given the go-ahead to annex Texas. However, there were so many issues discussed in the election that it was kind of impossible to tell if the voters actually mandated the annexation of Texas. Regardless, President Taylor signs a joint resolution to annex Texas 3 days before he leaves the White House. So this is President Polk. He wasn't a very impressive figure, and he took life too seriously. His tasks as president were made even more difficult by his refusal to delegate authority. Polk had 4 main objectives. Objective number 1, lower taxes. 2, re-establish an independent treasury. 3, acquire California. 4, settle the Oregon dispute. So let's discuss his first objective a little more in depth. The Secretary of the Treasury, Robert J. Walker, devised the Walker Tariff of 1846. Now what this tariff essentially did was lower the rate set by the tariff of 1842 from 32% to 25% over a few years. Clayites, aka people who supported Clay, New England and Middle State representatives argued against this bill because they believed it would ruin their manufacturing industries. Regardless, the bill was passed through, and it turned out that the against delegates had nothing to worry about, as the Walker Tariff of 1846 generated more revenue, mostly because it was established right before booms in the economy as well as influxes of heavy imports. Now let's talk about objective number 2, which was to re-establish an independent treasury. So in 1841, the independent treasury was dropped by the Whigs, but in 1864, around 23 years later, the treasury was re-established even after the opposition by pro-bank Whigs. I'm going to go more into depth about object number 3 in a little bit, but for now, let's talk about the Oregon dispute. In 1844, Northern Democrats promised reoccupation of the entirety of Oregon, but after Texas was annexed, Southern Democrats chilled out. Polk didn't want to go through with the 54-40 pledge his platform had made. He felt pressured by the offers his predecessors had made to London, so he proposed the compromise line of 49. But the British minister in Washington declined this offer in his own accords. British anti-expansionists, also known as Little Englanders, had now begun to not want Oregon because they no longer saw the value in the Columbia River. British anti-expansionists did not want to fight a war with the Americans for territory that had been acquired by the unpopular monopoly of the Hudson's Bay Company. In 1846, the British came around and proposed the 49 line. Polk was annoyed because the Washington minister had previously rejected him, so he put the decision into the senators' hands. They quickly accepted. During this time, America was a month in with the war with Mexico, and this influenced the Senate's vote because they needed to satisfy the people. The Oregon decision was controversial. Supporters of Manifest Destiny and the 54-40 line joined forces with anti-slavery rights to condemn this betrayal by the South. People asked, why all of Texas but not of Oregon? The reason Senator Benton of Missouri said was that Britain is powerful and Mexico is weak, which really demonstrated how America interacted with its allies according to what kind of power they had. The words of Senator Benton bring us back to Polk's third objective, acquire California. Polk was worried about California because the Bay of San Francisco was seen as America's future getaway to the Pacific Ocean. California's population at the time was mostly Native American and Spanish Mexicans. Polk wanted to buy California from Mexico, but relations with Mexico were increasingly tense. One source of tension was that the U.S. had claims of $3 million against Mexico for property damage. The regime had agreed to pay off this sum, but was forced to postpone its payment. Mexico threatened war if the U.S. took Texas. Mexico recalled its minister from Washington, and diplomatic relations were severed after annexation of Texas. The relations were further strained after Texas had begun to infringe upon the southerly Rio Grande border. Polk defended Texas's claims after it was annexed. The Mexicans were unconcerned with the boundary issue. They viewed Texas as theirs. Even so, Polk kept troops out of no man's land between the Nueces and the Rio Grande. There were some rumors that Britain was planning to take California, and this didn't sit well with the Americans due to the Monroe Doctrine. Polk was tight. In 1845, Polk sends John Slidell to Mexico City to offer $25 million for California and the territory to the east. The Mexican people didn't let Slidell present his insulting proposal. In 1846, a frustrated Polk sends 4,000 men under General Zachary Taylor to march from the Nueces to the Rio Grande. This was a taunting action meant to force Mexico to move its hand so the U.S. wouldn't look bad for fighting them for California. In May 1846, Polk reveals his plan to his cabinet to ask Congress to declare war on the basis of 1. Unpaid claims, and 2. Slidell's rejected proposal. A month before, in April 1846, Mexican troops had crossed the Rio Grande and attacked General Taylor's forces. There were 16 dead or wounded Americans. This news reached Polk the evening in May where he proposed his plan to wage war to his cabinet. Polk told Congress that war was necessary because Mexico had ignored diplomatic solutions and drew American blood upon the American soil. He bent the truth for his foreign policy goals. Patriotic Congress votes for war. Anti-slavery Whigs got caught up in the war fever and joined the rest of the nation. However, they later came to condemn Jimmy Polk's war. A young senator Abraham Lincoln insisted upon the location of the precise spot on American soil where American blood had been shed. Decisions upon the matter came to be known as the Spot Resolutions.